Hey pilgrims, I'm back today with another excerpt of that long Camino conversation I had with Jeremiah and Kate. Today we're going to talk about our friends, families, coworkers' reactions to us walking the Camino de Santiago. And I think that this is a topic that really applies to all pilgrims, whether you're planning a Camino or you've already walked a Camino. Everyone has a different reaction to when you kind of announce, oh, I'm going to go walk across Spain. I think sometimes when I'm in conversation with other pilgrims, or I'm in a Camino group, or on the forums, or certainly on the Camino, I think walking a long distance kind of starts to feel like a normal thing. And I've done it a lot now. So to me, it's really normalized. But I'm reminded every time I meet someone new who doesn't know that I walk the Camino and I'm explaining it to them, I am kind of reminded that, oh, this is a thing that's not really normal for most people. So I think there are a number of different reactions that people can have when you share that you're walking the Camino. And I think you'll hear that Jeremiah, Kate, and I have some similarities, but there are also some differences. I thought one really very interesting topic is the reactions that people have about us walking alone. And Jeremiah, Kate, and I have all walked Caminos alone, and you will hear in this video who had a different experience with that question than the others. So we hope you enjoyed this video. So without further ado, here's the conversation.
One thing we haven't talked about is, I guess, either before your first Camino or in subsequent ones, like if you had positive or negative reactions from family and friends, because I know that's something that's can be especially tough with either from the groups that I've seen or some of the women I met and men too, but that had young kids at home or had a partner that wasn't joining or had parents that were scared. Um, I personally didn't have I had a lot of support, but I had been traveling on my own throughout the world for basically like 12, 13 years at that point. So my parents were used to me just being like, hey, I'm going to Argentina tomorrow or wherever. It was more the bigger surprise for me. Like people were so excited to follow the journey. So I love that. And that's why I stayed active on social media during, because I'm like, this is the most interesting thing I've ever done. And I found a huge community, especially with women. The women I'm connected with on social media who's like, I've never heard of this. I'm looking for something like this in my life. This is so inspirational. So that made me really happy. But the biggest surprise for me was like people I met, especially in Spain, Spaniards, as I was walking in the towns. They're like, you're a young woman doing this on your own. Aren't you nervous? What do your parents think? And I just thought that was really interesting, that there was that reaction. I mean, I know sadly there has been some violence against women on the Camino over the years, very, very, very small numbers, of course, but we can't pretend it doesn't happen. And I think women are certainly more at risk for predators and things like that. So, that was my experience, but I just did think it was very interesting that like the bigger questioning and like hesitation was coming from people from the country. I think it is rare for maybe a Spanish person to like go walk alone, or a Spanish woman especially. But luckily I had a lot of support and just really interest from like my friends and family. How about you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of echo that experience of when I was on the Camino and walking as a solo woman and getting that question a lot. Like, you're walking alone, alone, alone. Like
Yeah, yeah.
feeling like I had to reassure whoever I was encountering that it's okay, it's okay. I like being alone. It's okay. I know people around. So I got that a lot when I was on the Camino, but I actually got that and still sometimes get that from not so much from family and friends anymore, because I think everyone now, they like know the Camino is my thing. They know I love going alone. But I think when I initially was planning my first Camino, I think had a lot of support, but I know that I got that question a lot, that like, oh, you're going alone. I hadn't done a ton of traveling before my Camino. I had studied abroad for a year in college, so that kind of gave me a good foundation. But then I had a number of years where I wasn't doing much international traveling. And so that could have been part of it. I kind of suddenly announced, hey, I'm going to walk across Spain. So I think a lot of people in my life were maybe a little taken aback. I think very supportive, but I think also kind of worried on my behalf. similar to some of the fears I had, like, could I physically do it? I think
Yeah.
some were kind of worried for me that I wasn't going to have a good time, that I, didn't have my trip planned out. What if I got hurt? What if I didn't enjoy it? I know for my mom, that was a big fear. She really, like, she kept asking, what happens if you fall and twist your ankle or break your ankle? What happens? What happens? And I kind of really had to explain, this isn't a hike in the wilderness, Mom. Like, there are going to be I walked in the summer, like, so many pilgrims around that, like, even if I'm walking alone, there's going to be a pilgrim coming up behind me in 5 minutes, 10 minutes max. Like, I'm not going off in the wilderness. And there are, there are pharmacies and hospitals and health clinics all along the way. And so some of that is also kind of educating, at least I found, other people about what the Camino is. I know here in the States, when I talk about, like, oh, I'm going to walk this long distance, a lot of people will think of our long distance trails here in the States, like the Appalachian Trail, the PCT. And
Right.
so I have
Camping.
found that, and camping. So I've had to explain, like, oh, well, no, I'm going to stay somewhere every night. I'm going to have a roof over my head. I'm sleeping in a bed. I'm going to have a 3-course meal most nights. Like, there's a little luxury here, unlike maybe some other kind of backpacking trips. So
Right.
I think that was kind of some of the initial reaction, but I think now, for the most part, and truly people were supportive, but I think now that I've gone back so many times, people kind of know it's almost part of my identity a little bit. They're like, oh, Nadine walks. She goes off and travels alone, and she walks. She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
So
It's
Jeremiah,
the
how about
perfect
you?
channel name, Nadine.
It
It's
is.
the
Nadine walks,
perfect
yeah.
channel name.
Nadine-
That's what she does. Nadine walks.
She just walks.
I love that. Now that
I
I
didn't
know
even think
that
about that
history.
when I said that, but it's funny.
Well, I mean, the patriarchy's still alive and well, so no one has ever asked me about walking alone. Not once, ever.
How
So
funny.
interesting.
Like,
Fascinating.
I mean, no one has ever even thought that was odd. And aside from, I think, obviously there are physical differences for many women that put them more at risk, but I think there's also all of the just assumptions about what men and women do and don't do alone. So yeah, I've never had any question about that. My former spouse was super supportive, still is super supportive, because we're co-parenting, about going, and she's been on Camino a couple times, and so super supportive about being able to go and to make this. Part of it's because it was work many of the times, so it was a little easier to be supportive on that. But taking 3 weeks off of parenting and allowing somebody else to just have to do all of the work for 3 straight weeks is not an easy thing, and so I don't take that lightly. But really thankful for the support there. My parents have never traveled internationally before, and so it doesn't matter where I'm going. If I'm going to a developing nation to do missions work, if I'm going traveling with the Marine Corps, it didn't matter where I'm going. My parents are always like, why are you doing that? They just have they can't make any sense of why I'm like, I call them up. I'm like, I forgot to tell them I was going to Belgium back in November. And I call them up while I'm there. I'm like, hey, just so you know, if you see pictures on the internet, it's because I'm in Brussels for a week. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, they can't really make sense of kind of the bug to travel. But it's not that they necessarily are worried. They think I'm going to get bombed, but they don't think I'm going to get, so just all the kind of irrational fears there, I think. But most of the people in my life have been super supportive. But like you said, Nadine, at this point, people understand this is part of my identity, and especially because this is a high profile for me often as I'm, bringing groups here and so on, and I'm promoting it and advertising it. And then obviously now with the channel, this is a pretty public thing for me, and people know that this is just part of what I do. So I had a lot of support for that, actually, and including from colleagues. Like one of my Caminos, I took 14 pastors with me from my state. Actually, some of them were from out of state, but so that was a kind of a professional support from my community and stuff too. So it's been really good in that sense. But my son definitely has no interest in going. I continue to want to say he's 13 next week, 2 weeks from now, and so I keep telling him, hey, we're gonna go, and he's like, no. Okay, well, I guess guess we're not going that. He said it's boring. What do you mean it's boring? So,
I was surprised about the number of kids that I saw with their parents. I mean, it wasn't a huge number, but I saw a mother with her 15-year-old daughter, a mother with her maybe 12-year-old son. There was a couple from Quebec that was with their two teenagers. I saw a woman who was actually walking, she was having her pack sent ahead and walking with her toddler. So mostly carrying her toddler. That did get to a point that it was pretty tough, and her husband actually flew over. I guess he'd been studying for the bar exam, and he's like, I can take it another time. So he came and joined them. So I think that was tougher. I saw a woman walking with her German Shepherd dog, but I know she said it was extremely difficult, and she would not do it again with the dog. Not because of the dog, but because of like finding places to stay. I saw the first cat that has ever completed. I met the first cat that ever completed the Camino de Santiago. His name is Gato Nomada. That was pretty cool. The guy who was carrying him had fashioned. He was carrying his entire pack, and then he had fashioned. He kind of had straps, and it was like almost just like a plastic bin. And the cat was so happy. Like, this cat loved the outdoors. It was really cool, really cool. So, for those people out there who are asking, can I travel with my kid or my kids or whatever? It's certainly possible. And I think in Spain too, Spain is a lot more relaxed in a lot of ways. Like, when it comes, like, American sensibilities are very different, right? So, like, even the concepts of like what is a swear word, or what is it inappropriate for a 13, 14, 15-year-old to have a glass of wine at dinner, or things like that. And I mean, I think regardless of your own beliefs, there's nothing bad about being exposed to other perspectives. And so I think it's a really healthy experience for a kid to have. I mean, good luck to you if you bring a teenager, but the people I knew, and actually one of the women I met the first night, she was walking with her 16-year-old son. He was sort of a quiet, typical teenager, and I think had some days of like, I want to go home. But when they finished, she said it was like just the best experience. Yeah. So maybe your son will come around.
I've had a lot of conversations with parents that have kids on Camino, actually, because I wonder about this. I wonder about when my son may be able to go. And actually, I have a high school sophomore going with me on this trip in May. One of the faculty's daughters. She's super mature. She doesn't seem like a 15-year-old at all. But I think one of the biggest things with children of any age, whether they're from 6 to 25, is if they have to be motivated to do it themselves. And I think often what happens is the parent can push them to do it. And you and I, we all made the decision for ourselves, and we're excited about it. If a kid just gets kind of forced into it, I don't think the dynamic is going to be the same,
Right.
And so that's part of why I've not been willing to push my son even a little bit, not even to nudge him. If he's not interested, if he's not excited about it, I'm not spending the money and making my experience terrible. To push him to do it. So
we really hope you enjoyed that. Remember to subscribe and follow Jeremiah at Camino Guide and Kate at Wanderlusting Lawyer. We're each trying to put out one video from this series on our channels about once a week. So you can find other parts of the conversation there. So definitely stay tuned for more. And please, in the comment section below, we would love to hear what your experience was when you shared with family and friends that you're going to walk the Camino. How did they react to you? So, buen Camino, and we'll be back soon with more.